What's up, guys? I'm back today with another tier list. I haven't done one of these in a while, and today I want to go and look back at the last 3 champions of every single division in the UFC and rank them on this tier list from legendary all the way to untested. Untested might mean you're a new champion and you haven't exactly proven yourself. Pretender is you were pretending to be champion, but we all knew you weren't the real champ. Solid speaks for itself. You were a solid champion, but nothing crazy. Amazing, you had great performances, maybe just lacked the longevity or the level of competition. And legendary is the best of the best. So that is kind of the criteria for the tier list. There are 24 fighters in this video, as there are 8 male divisions times the last 3 of every division. And in no particular order, I am going to rank these guys. So yeah, let's get right into it. Starting off with Jamal Hill. I think Jamal Hill is a pretender. I don't think he was ever the legit champion. This guy has some of the most overrated power in the UFC, and he went to a 5-round war with Glover. I know he beat up Glover, but it was a 43-year-old Glover. Let's not forget that Anthony Rumble Johnson, a guy with real power, KO'd Glover in 13 seconds. Rest in peace, Rumble. And Jamal Hill got so much praise for beating up a 43-year-old Glover over 5 rounds. I never really thought this guy was championship material, and now that he's been sunned by Yuri and Pereira, and I honestly would argue that Khalil Roundtree beats him, yeah, I have Jamal Hill as a pretender. Moving on to the next one, we're going to pull out Belal Muhammad, and obviously Belal Muhammad's going to be an untested. As much crap as I give Belal, I do give him his respect. At the same time, he's on like an 11-12 fight unbeaten streak. He became the welterweight champion, but he hasn't defended his belt yet. He was scheduled to defend against Shavkat in December, and he had to pull out of the fight due to injury, so we're waiting on that fight to be booked again. But as of now, he's untested, and I'm thinking we're going to see that Shavkat fight at UFC 315. Let's get on to the next one, Leon Edwards. I'm putting Leon in the solitaire. Listen, Leon Edwards, he got the belt against Kamaru Usman by a head kick and that Hail Mary head kick, and then he defended against Usman one time, which was a pretty good performance, but not the most dominant as people make it out to be. He comfortably beat Usman, and then he defended against aging Colby, who looked terrible in the fight. So I can't put Leon in amazing or legendary as a champion. He was a solid champion, and he didn't hold on to the belt that long. So yeah, shout out to Leon. He just is not going to make it much higher than that. Let's get on to the next one, Alex Pereira. I'm going to throw in the amazing tier. Now, a lot of people would argue that Alex Pereira is legendary, and you know what? If he beats Ankalaev at UFC 313, he will 100% be in the legendary tier. And I know he broke the record for the fastest 3 title defenses in modern UFC history. But I can't have him in legendary yet because his level of competition in Yuri and Jamal Hill has not been the strongest. So I need to see him beat Ankalaev. If Alex Pereira beats Ankalaev, then 100% he's moving up into the legendary status as a champion. But man, you want to talk about one of the most active champions in modern UFC history. This guy's just defending his belt every 2 months, it seems like. So respect to Alex Pereira. I have him in that amazing tier. Moving on to Stipe Miocic. I'm going to put in solid. Now, I am talking about the last time these guys were champions, so this would be Stipe's last title reign, whenever he beat Daniel Cormier to get the belt back and then beat him again in the trilogy, and then he lost to Francis. So I'd say his last title reign was impressive. It was solid. I wouldn't say it was legendary or amazing because he beat DC, came out with the body shots, but in the third fight, DC and him were both pretty old, so I don't rate that performance very high because DC was like 40, 41, and it was eye pokes and stuff. So yeah, Stipe's second title run, because I'm basing it off the most recent one, I would say that it was a solid one. Not amazing or not legendary. Moving on to Merab Dvalishvili, I'm going to put in the untested tier. Merab just got the belt against O'Malley, and then he defended against Umar. You know what? I'm going to put Merab in solid. I'm not going to put him in untested because he has defended his belt once. I'm not going to put him in amazing or legendary yet because he's only defended his title once against Umar, who arguably didn't deserve to fight for the belt, but he also deserved it because no one else in the division was up next. So he defended against Umar. That fought from a gym that has a lot of undefeated fighters, the Abdulmanap camp, and he beat Umar, and a lot of people, including myself, thought he was going to lose. So Merab, as of now, has a solid championship run. Obviously, if he's able to rack up 2, 3, 4 more title defenses against the level of competition that is at the top of Bantamweight, he could move up to amazing or legendary. But for me, as of now, I have him in solid. Moving on to the next one, which is Francis Ngannou. I'm going to put in solid as well. Listen, Francis got the belt against Stipe. He knocked out Stipe, who was, in my opinion, past his prime at 39 years old. And then he defended against Cyril Gane and barely won that fight. I think it might have been a split decision, but you could argue that Cyril Gane won that fight. He kind of just laid and prayed in the latter rounds. And then he went on a contract dispute with the UFC and eventually left the UFC to go to the PFL. So, yeah, I can't say Francis's title run was legendary or amazing. It was solid. He won the belt against Stipe. He defended against Gane, and then he left the promotion. So, yeah, not too much to say about that. But I can't put him in pretender because I do think he was the legit champion. Speaking of a pretender, Sean O'Malley, I'm putting as a pretender. Listen, I don't think Sean O'Malley was ever really the champion, you know? He was just holding that championship spot warm from Merab Dvalishvili. But I didn't think that Sean O'Malley beat Piotr Jan whenever they fought. I thought that Jan won that fight clearly, but the judges gave it to O'Malley, fair enough. And then he went on to finish Aljo. And then he defended against Cheeto. So the reason I have O'Malley in pretender is because his only title defense was against a guy who should have never fought for the title in Cheeto. They only built that fight so O'Malley can get a win back on Cheeto. When in reality, it should have maybe been a Corey Sandhagen. It should have been a Merab. It should have been a Piotr Jan. It should have been somebody else that was on a win streak at the time. But they gave it to Cheeto just so O'Malley can right that wrong. So he faced Aljamain Sterling, who fought him on 3 months' notice right after coming off a title fight. Fair enough, he beat him fair and square. Aljo accepted the fight, but he defended against a non-worthy title challenger. And I don't think Sean O'Malley was the best bantamweight in the division. I thought that other guys were better. So I will have O'Malley as a pretender. Hate on it if you would like. Moving on to the next one. Mr. Taptoro, Ilia Topuria. I'm putting in amazing. Just because of the quality of wins. He took the belt off of Volk, who was undefeated at featherweight, and then he's the first guy to KO Max Holloway, which was pretty impressive. But with only one title defense, no way he can go in legendary. If he went on to finish Diego Lopez, Mavzor Evloev, and then maybe one more fighter at featherweight and have like 3 or 4 title defenses with the level of competition, he would definitely go in legendary, but he just hasn't done enough to be considered a legendary champion quite yet in my book. So for Mr. Taptoro, I have him in the amazing category. Moving right on to another pretender, Mr. Sean Strickland. Sean Strickland's a pretender. Listen, he was just keeping that belt warm for Dricus because he couldn't even defend the belt one time. And Dricus proved this past weekend that he was the better fighter between him and Strickland. Him and Strickland had a really close first fight. But if you really look at Strickland's title reign, he was never even supposed to get the shot against Adesanya. He kind of just capitalized on a short notice opportunity because Dricus couldn't make it. And then he won the belt off Adesanya, dominated him, fair enough. And then Dricus took the belt right off of him and, yeah, defended the title against him again. So I got to have Strickland in pretender because I don't think he was truly ever the best middleweight. Dricus just hadn't got there yet. So for me, Sean Strickland is a pretender. Moving on to the next one. Kamaru Usman, you know what? I'm going to give him his respect. I know I talk about his title reign being a little overrated due to the rematches, but I'm going to say his championship run was legendary. Listen, there's not many fighters in UFC history that can say they got 5 title defenses. And although 2 of those were against Masvidal and 2 of those against Covington, he beat a prime Covington 2 times. He finished a prime Gilbert Burns, and he's one of the only guys in the UFC to knock out Jorge Masvidal out cold, and an active champion, fought often, finished fights and championships. So I got to give Kamaru Usman his respect, even if I think his title run's a little overrated. It was indeed legendary. So shout out to the Malteser head, Kamaru Usman, in the legendary category, the first one of this video. Let's move on to the next one, Davison Figueiredo. I'm going to put him in the solid tier. Davison Figueiredo got the belt against Joseph Benavidez by legit, like, nearly killing him. He got the belt off of Joe B. And then he fought to a draw with Brandon Moreno. And then I think the next time, Brandon Moreno beat him by unanimous decision. And then they did another fight, and Davison won. I'm not sure. They had 4 fights, but Davison Figueiredo was a solid champion. He wasn't able to hold on to the belt. He won it against Joe B. And then in this quadrilogy with Brandon Moreno, he ended up losing it at the end. So I wouldn't say he was an amazing champion. I think solid is a fair part for him. Moving on to the next one, Islam Makhachev on one of the most legendary championship runs in UFC history, beating Charles Oliveira and Alexander Volkanovski. And if you guys don't know, whenever he beat Charles Oliveira, Charles was on an 11-fight win streak with 10 finishes. And when he beat Alexander Volkanovski, Volkanovski was like 13-0 in the UFC. So he ended 2 double-digit win streaks in the UFC and 2 guys in the pound-for-pound rankings, which is extremely impressive. And he's finished like 8 of his last 9 fights, most title defenses in lightweight history. So time to give Makhachev his flowers. He is on an absolutely legendary title run, and yeah, man, unless Topuria KOs him, I don't see anybody at lightweight taking that belt off of him. So respect to Islam. I do think he is in that legendary category or as far as champions go. Let's get on to the next one, which is going to be Israel Adesanya, which I am going to put in, where do I put Izzy? I'm going to put Izzy in solid because I'm counting the last time he was champion. I'm not counting his first title win because this is his first title run with the 5 title defenses. This is whenever he KO'd Alex Pereira and got his belt back. And he KO'd Alex Pereira, and then he lost the fight right away to Sean Strickland, and he hasn't won a fight since, I don't think. So do I put it in solid or pretender? No, I'm going to put it in solid because he did earn the belt by KO and Alex Pereira, a guy that had already beat him twice in kickboxing and won in the UFC. So I am going to say Izzy's second title reign at middleweight, despite not having 0 defenses. The fact that he knocked out his arch nemesis, who had 3 total wins over him, is pretty impressive. So I'm going to give Izzy that respect and put him in the solid tier. Yeah, I can't say I put him as pretender because Alex Pereira was the best middleweight, and he came back to KO him, even though he couldn't defend his belt. So he was a solid champion in his second. That sounds so weird to say. A guy won the belt and lost it. He's a solid champion, but I'm giving him his respect for finally beating Alex Pereira, which is a very impressive win. There's something to be said about beating a guy you couldn't beat your entire combat sports career, and you finally get it done. Moving on to the next one, we have Alessandro Pantoja, who I'm going to put in the amazing tier. He's not quite at that legendary level yet, in my opinion. He's got some title defenses, but a lot of his fights have been close. He went back and forth, a very close fight to win the belt off of Moreno. It was a good scrap, but he clearly won. He went life and death with Usyk. A lot of people gave that fight to Usyk. And then he kind of camped in half guard against Brandon Royval. Not the most exciting fight. And then he smoked Kai Asakura. So Alessandro Pantoja, a very great champion. I wouldn't say exactly the most dominant. Outside of his Kai Asakura fight, he hasn't been like the most dominant. Sure, he kind of dominated Brandon Royval, but his fights against Moreno and against Usyk were pretty close. So Pantoja needs to do more to get into that level of legendary. But let me just say, he is at the bottom of the amazing tier. I don't think he has title reigns on the level of a Pereira or Topuria. So I have him at the bottom of the amazing tier. Maybe if he goes and beats Kai Kara-France and then he goes to beat Kopp, if he goes on a win streak, he can go up to legendary, but I don't know. Pantoja, for me, might have to go up and win a second belt to get legendary just because the level of competition at flyweight isn't the strongest. So, yeah. Respect to Pantoja. He's on a solid run. I'm going to have him in that amazing tier. Moving on to the next one, we're going to have Charles Oliveira, who I'm also going to put in that amazing tier. Listen, Charles Oliveira went on one of the most exciting runs in UFC history with his 11-fight win streak, 10 finishes, and he captured the belt. And outside of the UFC screwing him over on the weight miss, he defended it twice. So he fights for the belt against Charles Oliveira. Against Michael Chandler. He absolutely destroys Michael Chandler in the second round, KO'd him, finishes him in the UFC. And then he gets matched up with Dustin Poirier, chokes Dustin Poirier out. Then he sends Justin Gaethje flying across the octagon, chokes him out. So, man, for as short as it was, Charles Oliveira had such an amazing title run. And can you imagine if he would have went in there and finished Islam with a submission? He definitely would have won in legendary. But Charles Oliveira, although one of the most exciting title runs, I'm going to put him at the top, right behind Pereira. Although one of the most exciting title runs in modern UFC history, the issue is he didn't have the longevity. Only 2 title defenses. Yes, I'm counting that Gaethje fight as a title defense, even though he got stripped of the belt because that was complete BS. So, yeah. Extremely exciting run by Charles. Got to give him his respect. He had an amazing title run. And like I said, for Pereira, and amazing. If he beats Ankalaev this weekend, I'd move him to legendary, honestly. Moving on to the next one, we'll go Dricus du Plessis. Also amazing. Dricus, since he's gotten the belt, has been nothing but impressive. He won the belt against Strickland in a very close back-and-forth fight that you could have arguably scored for Strickland last January in 2024. But he came back to absolutely dismantle and destroy Strickland this past weekend and showed he is that guy. Just beat Strickland pillar to post, snapped his nose, and he destroyed Adesanya. Not destroyed. He had a pretty decent fight with Adesanya where he ultimately got the tap on Adesanya. So, yeah, as a champion, 2 title defenses, finished Adesanya, and then dominantly beat Strickland. So, yeah, man, Dricus, if he beats Hamzat and then goes on to, like, defend another time against a Baralho or Mavov, you might have to move him up to legendary, especially because Dricus is one of those guys that typically, if he doesn't, like, dominate you and he wins by decision, as he did against Strickland, he's going to do a lot of damage. So, yeah, shout out to Strickland. To Dricus du Plessis for being an amazing champion. And he fights very often. I'm going to have him at the bottom of that amazing tier, but maybe I put Dricus right above Pantoja just because he's dominating and finishing guys at the top. So, yeah, shout out to my boy Dricus, as they call him. Moving on to the next one, Brandon Moreno. I'm going to put Brandon Moreno in... I don't want to be disrespectful. I'm going to put him in solid. I could put Brandon Moreno in pretender and just say he only had the belt because Pantoja had made it to the top yet, but I'm going to give him his respect. He beat the flyweight boogeyman in Davison Figueiredo, who was literally KO in everyone. Look at what Davison Figueiredo did to, what's his name? Did to Joseph Benavidez 2 times, and Brandon Moreno went in there, beat him by decision once, and submitted him in the other fight. So that in itself is very impressive. Fighting a quadrilogy with Davison Figueiredo, and I don't think he got dropped. If he did, he got dropped like 1 time, and knowing how powerful Figueiredo is. And yeah, Brandon Moreno had a solid title championship win. I'd say he's at the bottom of solid. Maybe he's right above Izzy because he actually did get a title defense. But yeah, he's right on that same level with Figgy. Him and Figgy had like similar title runs, and they're in the same division, so that's actually quite funny. Let's get on to the next one, Max Holloway. I'm going to put Max Holloway in solid. Listen, Max Holloway, his title run, who did he defend against? He got the belt against Aldo. He defended again against Aldo. Then he defended against Frankie and Ortega. So do you put that in amazing? Yeah. If I'm going to put Pantoja in amazing, I got to put Holloway in amazing. I think Holloway had an amazing title run. It just was short-lived because Volkanovski came along. But whenever he was champion, there's something to be said about beating Jose Aldo twice in a row. And then beating undefeated Brian Ortega was the first guy to do it. And beating Frankie Edgar, who was on a resurgence. So, yeah, we'll give Max Holloway his flowers. The bottom of amazing tier. He had 3 title defenses, a decently dominant champion. Yeah, shout out to Maximus Jerome Holloway. Moving on to the next one, Aljamain Sterling, I think, was a pretender. Listen, look at Aljamain Sterling. He had a close fight with a 37-year-old Cejudo who was 4 years off retirement. He beat a one-armed TJ Dillashaw who literally came into the fight with 1 arm. And he won a split decision over Petr Yan. He should have never got the belt in the first place over Petr Yan because he had an Oscar-winning performance where he got a DQ win after he was getting his ass beat by Yan. So, yeah, and then the first, what was it? And then when he fought O'Malley, he got KO'd by a guy who didn't even have a rib in that fight. So, yeah. I'm disrespecting Aljo a little bit. Listen, Aljo did his thing at bantamweight, but I think he was a pretender. I don't know, man. No, I'm going to put Aljo in solid. I'm going to put him in solid. I don't want to be that much of a hater. Aljamain Sterling did defend his title twice, and he did prove in the rematch with Yan that he could fairly beat Yan by taking his back multiple rounds, and he did beat Henry Cejudo, although was older, was a great fighter. The TJ Dillashaw win, I don't put too much weight into that. Yeah, I guess I got to put Aljo in solid. If I put him in pretender, I don't know. I do feel like at one point he was the best bantamweight on the planet for at least maybe for 1 fight. So I got to put him in solid. I can't disrespect him that much. Let's get on to the next one. Alexander Volkanovski, I'm going to put in legendary. One of the most legendary title runs ever in the history of the UFC. Just to beat Max Holloway 3 times is such an unfathomable accomplishment that nobody else in UFC history has done. And to do it dominantly, destroying TKZ, destroying Yair Rodriguez, destroying Brian Ortega. Volkanovski was just styling on these guys on the feet. His striking was just so much levels above other fighters that it was such a treat to watch this guy fight. 5 title defenses, 2 of them against Max Holloway, 1 against TKZ, 1 against Brian Ortega, and 1 against Yair Rodriguez. So yeah, Volkanovski definitely earned his stripes. A legendary title run, got to the status of pound for pound #1 fighter in the world. So in my opinion, Volkanovski had a legendary title run. That came to a screeching halt by the good old Ilia Topuria. Moving on to another fighter, which is Yuri Prohaska. I'm going to put Yuri, as weird as it sounds, in untested. Because he never really... Do I put Yuri as a pretender? Nah. I don't want to disrespect Yuri, but I got to put him in pretender. He was never... he beat Glover for the belt, but it's like Glover was 42 years old, and he made a lot of mistakes in that fight. If he wouldn't have made the mistakes he made at the end of the fight, and I know if I had wheels, I'd be a bike. I know that kind of argument, but Glover was very old. Yuri beat Glover, and then he got injured, and then he came back and got finished by Pereira twice. And he almost lost to Rakic before he secured that second round TKO, and then he beat Jamal Hill. So I don't think Yuri was ever truly the best light heavyweight in the world. He just came in at a good time. So I do think that Yuri and Jamal Hill are both pretenders, just especially when you watch how easily Pereira beat them both. It's hard to say that these guys were the best light heavyweights, and it was more so because Pereira had made it to the top of the division yet. So yeah, I'm going to have Yuri as a pretender. And moving on to the second to last one, we got Khabib Nurmagomedov. I contemplated putting him in amazing, but I am going to put him in legendary. There is something to be said about submitting Justin Gaethje, Conor McGregor, and Dustin Poirier all back to back dominantly too. What he did to Poirier, he made Poirier look hopeless in that fight. He beat McGregor up on the ground and literally made him quit after all that bad blood. And Justin Gaethje, he looked like he was in flow state, absolutely transitioning, emoting on Justin Gaethje in the grappling. So although Khabib only had 3 title defenses, it was extremely dominant. He never lost in the UFC. He retired as the champion. So I am going to have him at the bottom of the legendary tier. Let me fix the legendary tier. I think it's Islam. No, I think it's Volkanovski had the best title run, then Islam, then Kamaru Usman, and then Khabib. Just because I think Islam needs one more win to pass up Volk's title run, just because Volk's title run was insane with how dominant and like how just he was technically breaking down guys. But either way, yeah, Khabib in the legendary tier just because 3 insanely good title defenses and dominated all 3 guys, and then he retired on top. So I will give him his respect. Moving on to the last one, and this one's going to come as a surprise, but Jon Jones in the heavyweight division. Listen, Jon Jones is a pretender. Heavyweight, I'm sorry, man. He's a pretender. He beat Cyril Gane for the belt, who was never really good enough to be champion. And the only reason he was champion, well, I guess you could argue he beat Francis, but Cyril Gane got beat by Jon Jones, and then Jon Jones decided to fight a 42-year-old Stipe Miocic instead of fighting his interim champ, Tom Aspinall. So Jon Jones is literally the definition of a pretender. Tom Aspinall is the uncrowned champ. And yeah, Jon Jones is nothing more than a duck. If he fights Aspinall, respect to him, but I don't think he will. I think he will retire. But I cannot have Jon Jones as amazing, solid, or legendary as a heavyweight champion with what he's been doing recently in his division. And no, I'm not talking about light heavyweight Jon Jones. Just to clarify, I'm talking about heavyweight Jon Jones. Because Jon Jones was not in the last 3 champions at light heavyweight, so I'm not including him. He's the champion right now at heavyweight, so I'm going to have him as pretender just because of the active ducking of Tom Aspinall. And yeah, that's ultimately the end of the video, guys. We got the legendary guys. We got 4 of those. Amazing, solid, pretender, untested. Let me know what you guys think in the comments. How would you move these guys around, and did I get it right? Or am I an absolute casual and butchered this entire list? Let me know down below. Drop a like on the video if you guys missed the tier list. Leave a comment. I appreciate you guys watching. I'm out, and peace.